Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio, where we provide actionable health information on a week-to-week basis that can help you improve your life. Feel free, head over to justinhealth.com, where we have various opt-in video series on more in-depth health topics such as female hormones, thyroid, and gut health. Also, while you're there, feel free and schedule a consult with myself, Dr. J, and or my colleagues. We're available worldwide to provide natural health support for any of your major health issues. Again, welcome to the podcast and enjoy the show. We are live. It's Dr. J here in the house with Evan Brand. Today, we're going to be chatting about low serotonin, signs, symptoms, and natural functional medicine root cause solutions to get to the root of why everything's happening, why these mood issues, energy issues, cognitive issues could be at play. Evan, how are you doing today, man?
Doing really well. I'm excited to dive in with you here. This is an issue that I suffered with when I had gut issues. And, once I figured out the connection between gut and mood, it was a game changer because I was focused so much on mood supplements, right? I would take like rhodiola as a natural antidepressant, help to boost energy. I would take ashwagandha to help with hormones and adrenal support. But I didn't realize that I was missing the smoking gun, which was all the gut infections I had. So I was playing with adaptogenic herbs long before I had the knowledge I have now about gut infections and serotonin. And so what I first want to tell people is that you can come in and you can spot treat things, like you can use different nutrients and amino acids to help serotonin. But in reality, we really need to be focusing on the gut. You and I have discussed this many times, but a large percentage of serotonin is going to be made in the intestines. And if you've got bacterial overgrowth or parasites or other infections, that pathway is not going to be working as optimally. And no, this is not a deficiency of antidepressant drugs.
Exactly, right? So serotonin, neurotransmitter, helps a lot with motility, helps a lot in the digestive tract, right? Also, a lot of serotonin supposedly does not cross the blood-brain barrier. There's a lot of people that talk about this. A lot of the precursor amino acids like 5-HTP or even dopamine or tyrosine, the precursor amino acids can actually cross the blood-brain barrier and then also convert. So, of course, there's some people that say, like Evan just said about the serotonin being made in the gut, really important, helps with motility, probably does have some mood influences just because the gut's so important for absorption of all these nutrients, and we need serotonin for reasonably healthy gut function. But we also need to be able to break down all of our protein and amino acids, because all these amino acids are the building blocks for all of our neurotransmitters, whether it's serotonin, dopamine, glutamate, GABA, whether it's our beta endorphin. All these are really, really important, and we have to be able to break them down. So, of course, things like low stomach acid, low enzymes, gut inflammation from food allergies, gut bugs, infections, being overly stressed, over sympathetic nervous system output, adrenal dysfunction, chronic high or low cortisol. All of these things are going to shift our nervous system. It's going to activate our fight or flight nervous system response. And those things can play a major role in being able to digest, absorb, and assimilate. So that's like kind of a foundational thing I want to just kind of start with off the bat, because we need that to be in place. And then once that's in place, that gives us a good neurological foundation to not overly activate our sympathetic nervous system response, have the enzymes and the acids. And then, of course, we're making an assumption that we're eating really good foods that are anti-inflammatory, nutrient dense, and low toxin to kind of provide those building blocks out of the gates.
Yeah, well, you just highlighted something important here, which is this serotonin issue, and other neurotransmitters too can be a vicious cycle, in the sense that if you have gut infections, reducing stomach acid levels, now you've got this malabsorption issue. So you're not going to get the aminos anyway to manufacture the neurotransmitters. So you could come in and you could use aminos supplementally to try to spot treat. But in reality, if you don't fix the infection creating the malabsorption in the first place, it doesn't matter how well you do on the diet. It's not about what you eat. It's about what you digest from what you eat. And I think that's the important piece of the conversation that's missing with people, is they focus on do this food, do that food, but it doesn't take into account, are you actually absorbing and assimilating that? And we know, based on Dr. Wright's work in his amazing book, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You, that by age 30, 40, 50, 60, and beyond, you make less stomach acid just with age alone. And that doesn't even account for the fact of modern life stress, circadian rhythm issues, adrenal issues, not chewing your food, that kind of stuff. So irregardless of the lifestyle factors, just age alone is enough to create a bigger problem. So let's just run down the list real quick together here of too low of a level of serotonin. Now, you may see various lists across the internet. Justin and I found one that we like from a respected source. So I'm just going to kind of run down the list here of too low serotonin. Of course, depression, everyone thinks about that, but also anxiety, insomnia or sleep problems, nervous or worried, poor response to stress, negativity or pessimism, irritable or impatient, self destructive, potentially even suicidal thoughts, low self esteem or self confidence. You feel worse in the winter. So you could call it a winter depression if you'd
Hmm.
like.
Yep.
Anger or rage, explosive behavior, inflammation. Here's one that's interesting. We need to, I think, talk about this further. PMS, and then OCD or eating disorders as well have a link to serotonin. So the PMS is interesting. What do you think the mechanism is there?
Well, a lot of female hormones like progesterone, for instance, and or just healthy progesterone estrogen balance have major effects. Basically, they're like monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So essentially, they almost are like mini antidepressants. They help kind of keep a lot of the neurotransmitters in between the post and presynaptic synapse. So you kind of have this presynaptic synapse. We have a postsynaptic synapse, and this is what's called the synaptic cleft, right? These are where the neurotransmitters accumulate between the two. Okay. And things like progesterone, for instance, they have a mild serotonin reuptake inhibition effect. Now, when you do medications, the problem with medications, the longer you keep those neurotransmitters between the synapses here, the faster those neurotransmitters are recycled and broken down. That's why over time, people that are on antidepressants or SSRIs, their dose has to go up, not down, especially if you don't fix like underlying root issues. So I think a lot of these hormones like progesterone, we know is a GABA chloride channel inhibitor. So GABA is big because it promotes relaxation. The more relaxed and calm your nervous system is, the less chance you're going to be burning through serotonin because you're less stressed. And there's a monoamine oxidase inhibition effect, right? MAO inhibitor. So it's almost like a mild antidepressant in a way, for sure.
Cool, cool. Totally interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like, part of the protocol could be both. It could be using potentially some hormones, like maybe some progesterone, but also coming in with the amino acids. And then once you figure out what's going on after you test, then you could come in and start fixing the infection. So let me just tell just a brief story. I think people relate to the stories here. So I just remember, when I was down in Texas and I had gut infections, I had just a baseline anxiety level that was so high. Now, granted, I was away from home. I had some homesickness. I missed my family, that kind of thing. But this was different. This was related to my gut because as soon as I was doing antimicrobial herbs, the anxiety was 25, maybe 50, maybe even 75% better. So I can just tell you personally, you and I've seen it clinically as well, but just personally for me, I was doing supplemental GABA, I was doing motherwort, passion flower, all the calming herbs, but it didn't matter how many calming herbs I did. It was just a band-aid. It wasn't root cause. So I just want to make sure people understand that there's a difference between natural and functional. So natural medicine is like, hey, you're anxious, take passion flower. Functional medicine is like, okay, fine, take passion flower, but why are you anxious? And that's the secret sauce.
Correct. I think with you, I mean, part of the underlying reason was you had multiple gut infections that were not being addressed. So
Yep.
there was that kind of thing in the background. I think that was really important. And so fixing that played a big role. You had some potential mold stuff that was hiding as well. I think there was also some blood sugar stuff that was happening with you as well that we were looking at. I think you also had like really low blood pressure too, didn't you?
Yeah, my blood pressure was like maybe 100 over 70. So
So there
on the
was
lower side.
so there was definitely very weak adrenals where your mineral corticoids were paying a price and you weren't able to hold up a lot of the hold in a lot of the minerals, so your blood pressure was dropping, so you weren't able to really perfuse blood flow adequately, right? And so yeah,
Yep.
all these things play a big role. And so
Well, and I
it's
was
really
peeing.
important.
I was peeing a lot too. So I was up in the middle of the night, 3, 4, 5 times to pee. I now know that that was related to mold because since using appropriate binders, I no longer wake up in the middle of the night to go pee. So just folks listening, could be an adrenal component as well. But, for me, the excess urination was definitely a mold thing and it's luckily resolved.
Exactly. So you already kind of talked about a lot of the symptoms. Let's just kind of go over those real quick. So we have our high serotonin symptoms just briefly here. Let's hit them again. So too high, depression, anxiety, nervous, being a worrier,
These are
inability to deal
low.
with stress.
These are low. You said too
Oh,
high.
I'm
You mean
sorry.
too
Yeah,
low.
I'm sorry. These were too low. Depression, anxiety, nervous, worry, anger, PMS, right? And then on the high side, let's go over the high ones again briefly. Do we have those high ones listed out?
No, there's no high on
There's
this
no, yeah,
particular
there's
list.
no high. Okay, there's no high for those. Okay, so those are the big ones with the serotonin, right? Now, we already talked about the foundational things. So when we talk about nutrients, just kind of make sure everyone that's listening understands foundation has to be in place. Good foods, good digestion, good hydration, management of stress. I mean, we can talk about different techniques that help decrease stress. I won't go into specifics, but I'm a big fan of EFT, EMDR, NLP, a lot of tapping techniques or eye movement techniques that can help rewire the nervous system, that can help dampen sympathetic nervous system responses. There's another one that you like, Evan, that you did that does a lot of rewiring as well. Which one's that?
You talking the brain retraining?
Yeah, brain retraining. A lot of that
Yeah. So
requires a lot
some
of NLP.
yeah, I'm playing with a couple of them. Yeah, some of it is kind of NLP strategy. There's one called Gupta. There's another one called DNRS. They're just different
DNRS, that's a big
online.
one.
Yeah, they're online brain retrainings. I'm going to work through the Gupta one and I'll have feedback for people, but I have done the DNRS. It's basically just trying to rewire your brain, right? You're trying to tell your brain that your issues are fine and all of that. So I like it, but I think EFT is better. I like the tapping aspect of EFT.
Yeah,
It's
tapping's
huge.
nice. You can feel a nice reduction of that nervous system response. It's like when your brains are used to firing a certain way. It's like if you have a big backyard and you go on a hike or you go for a hike where your local park, there's a path kind of carved out. When you go into the woods and that path's there, where do you go? You naturally walk on the path. You don't just go randomly go in the woods with all the sticks and trees and ticks, right? You kind of go on that carved out path. Your brain kind of works the same way. So when it's used to thinking about something a certain way, it carves out a path. And when you jump on that, when you jump in the woods and you see that path, you naturally go down that way. And so essentially the tapping is kind of like, it's a way of like pulling out the machete and kind of carving out a new path in the brain to fire a little bit differently.
That's
kind
a
of how
great
that works.
analogy. Yeah, that's a great analogy. You're saying how basically with this low serotonin that you can get stuck in these pathways of like pessimism and negative thinking and all of that. So it's harder to break out.
Yeah, I listened to Julia Ross lecture one time because she's an MFT, marriage family therapist, and she has done counseling on lots of people, and she has had clients and patients for decades where they just couldn't get over certain issues. And she just started utilizing nutrients and amino acids, and these problems that were problems just naturally were non-issues. They just became, people were able to get over them so much easier. And a lot of that is you need the mental neurological equipment to be able to process and handle them. You know, my analogy I give patients, it's like staying up all night and then trying to do your taxes the next morning. Like you just may not be able to have that mental capacity to handle it. And so I look at neurotransmitters, it's giving you the equipment you need to deal with these issues. It's like giving a child adult level problems. Like they're just going to be overwhelmed. They're not going to be able to handle it and process it. And so if you have the right neurological equipment on board, that gives you the ability to handle it. And then also having these extra strategies in our back pocket, like I mentioned with the EMDR, the EFT. Now, the easiest thing is you just talk about the problems and you just kind of tap all the different EFT spots. Side of the eyebrows, middle of the eyebrows, underneath the eyes, underneath nose and chin, collarbone, underneath the nipple area, under the armpit, right? And those are the really good spots you can do. You can do right in the parietal line in the center of the brain here. Those are all good spots. And you can just kind of talk about the problem, whatever the problem is. Let's say you're at a 7 out of 10, 10 being, the most sensation or irritability or palliative emotion that you could feel. Ideally, you want to get it below a 5. So I always just say, talk about the problem, talk about the fear, talk about the emotion you're feeling, and try to get it below a 5. And ideally, if you can get it below a 3, even better. And so you just keep on doing that. And it's a good way out of the gates. And then also NLP kind of comes in where you really are focused on the pictures that you have in your brain, right? The pictures that you have in your brain are very important. So you really want to put pictures of yourself succeeding, doing the thing right. And then an easy kind of NLP technique is you can do the stop sign, have that stop sign flash in front of your mind's eye when you start thinking things that are negative, or you can do no, stop, right? There's a DNRS one that you can tell them about too.
Yeah, yeah, and then that's what they do. You basically just basically tell yourself that your brain's sending your body false messages. So it's like this negativity, it's this fear, it's this hyperstimulation, it's the overreaction. You're trying to just shut that down. And the mind is powerful. I think it's an underappreciated thing. Now, you made a great point, which is that you got to have the fuel in the fuel tank, right? So you could do all the physical tapping and all that stuff, but if you simply just don't have any neurotransmitters in the tank, it's going to be tough to focus on this. It's going to be tough to have drive to get this done. So that's where you and I are going to come in, and let's talk about some of the testing now. So we're going to be looking at like an organic acids testing, and we're going to look and measure some of the various aspects. We did a podcast recently on low dopamine, so check that out if you're interested. But in that same category, we're going to be able to measure the serotonin marker. And once we look at that, we can see where people are at. And then, of course, we're going to factor in what's going on with the gut too, because rarely is the serotonin going to become a dysfunctional problem unless there's a gut issue as well. So we may see candida, bacterial overgrowth, parasites, H. pylori, gut inflammation, and low serotonin.
Yep.
It's rarely just low serotonin by itself.
100%. And so it's good to have the foundation. It's good to have some tapping techniques. Now let's go talk about some of the other nutrients. So we know things like 5-HTP or tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. And serotonin's, obviously that neurotransmitter that helps with focus and feeling good. It's a very, happy neurotransmitter. A lot of times dopamine can overlap because dopamine helps with focus. It's an I love you neurotransmitter. So a lot of times there can be an overlap in those symptoms. And a lot of times people that have low serotonin could have low dopamine as well. And also the enzyme that metabolizes serotonin, that metabolizes 5-HTP and converts it downstream to serotonin is the aromatic decarboxylase enzyme. And that enzyme also metabolizes dopamine. So if you constantly take 5-HTP support chronically, you probably want to have a little bit of dopamine tyrosine support as well, because you can create some functional deficiencies long-term. So just kind of keep that in mind. Like in my line, we have a product called Brain Replete that has a 10-to-1 balance of tyrosine to serotonin. And if you're taking a lot of serotonin, it's probably okay, especially if you're testing it on the organic acid. But just long-term, you probably want to throw a little bit of dopamine, whether it's tyrosine, in there to provide some building blocks. That's excellent out of the gates. And then there's a couple of really important methyl support that needs to be there. B6 and B12 are very, very important. B6 is incredibly necessary for the synthesis of neurotransmitters. We need B6 as an important cofactor, and so is B12. And B12 is methylated. B12, really important for the methylation of these neurotransmitters, where we attach a carbon and 3 hydrogen to it. That's methylation. Very important. Also, vitamin C is very important because vitamin C tends to be burnt up and overly utilized when there's a lot of adrenal stress as well. We talked about 5-HTP. We talked about some potential tyrosine. And then it's also nice to throw in a little bit of an adaptogen, because adaptogens help with the stress response. They help with perceived stress. So even if you're stressed right now, just giving you some support on the adaptogenic herbal side will change your perception to it. And so things like rhodiola or ashwagandha or ginseng or eleuthero are amazing to help kind of, or even maca, especially women do very well with maca, are very good for stress perception and stress modulation.
Yeah, great calls. So just to back up what you said, there was a trial done. And we're not fans of drugs. We prefer to try to come at it the natural, functional way whenever possible. However, there was a study done that compared antidepressant use and just antidepressant by itself compared to antidepressant plus B12. And 100% of the subjects that got the B12 and the antidepressant showed at least a 20% improvement with their symptoms compared to the antidepressant alone. So just to tell you one more time, antidepressant plus B12, 20% improvement in the outcome as opposed to just the antidepressant by itself. And then also folate, same thing. There's a paper on folate and how that also boosts things up. And then I don't know if you've played with this one much, but have you seen some of the scaledium extracts? You've got some of these saffron and scaledium blends like the Zembrin. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. I'll put it in the chat for you so you can look at this tech sheet. You might have to log in, but I'm going to send it to you.
Yeah. Put those links to the studies and we'll put it in the description notes after the show so you guys can take a peek at it.
Yeah.
But
so Justin,
really,
I just put it for you in the chat if you want to see it. Like I said, you may have to log in to see this tech sheet, but this is a cool product. And I've used it with some people that were previously on antidepressants and they got off of it. And many of them reported they felt just as good. And so the scaledium plant, it's kind of an indigenous South African plant. Indigenous people have used it. It says for relaxation, stress reduction, calming thirst and hunger. prior to long hunting trips, which is pretty cool.
Mm.
And it acts like an SSRI. So the scaledium binds to the serotonin transporters, inhibiting the reuptake of serotonin from the synapse, resulting in increased serotonin concentration in the synaptic cleft. It's the same mechanism of prescription SSRIs. So this is a game changer potentially. And like I said, I've had clients that were previously on the pharmaceuticals and then they did this one and they like this one much, much better.
That's good. Yeah, there's a lot of good options. It's nice to have some herbals, whether it's adaptogens or the scaledium, whether it's the saffron. And I think in that, the important cofactors need to be there: B6, B12. You could
Yeah.
maybe even throw in some full weight in there because full weight tends to interact. So I tend to have products that will have B6, will have the serotonin, have the dopamine support, and then we always, like, I think you're in the same place, always having a really good multi there in the background just to make sure all those cofactors are there. And then, of course, having a really good solid diet as a foundation, that kind of gives you that insurance policy that the building blocks are there, the cofactors are there, and then you can really hit things more therapeutically after.
Yep, absolutely. Now, have you played with any of the other testing? We already hit on the oat test, but there are some companies that do just neurotransmitters. Have you ever played with those at all?
Well, the whole idea with some of those is that you may not get a good window of what's happening in the brain, right? So
Mm,
supposedly you have the ideal one is going to be some kind of like a spinal tap, right? Where you really get a window into what's in the cerebral spinal fluid, which is kind of flowing to the brain. That's kind of like your ideal. Obviously, that's invasive. And then the urinary metabolites, I think, are pretty good because you kind of get a window. Like if someone's buying a whole bunch of food, you kind of get a window by going into their trash what they bought last week, right? It's kind of like that. So you get a pretty good window of how you're doing. So if we don't see a lot of stuff in the trash or we see too much stuff in the trash, that gives you a window of what your body's utilizing. And so that's organic acids we'll look at with serotonin, and we'll look at 5-hydroxyindole acetate, 5-HIIA. So that's helpful to give a window into it to know what's happening. And then we'll apply some of those nutrients, maybe 100 milligrams of 5-HTP at a time. And we'll kind of go up from there. And I like doing it more, at the last half of the day, especially if it's more calming and relaxing, because some people, they may get too tired because of it during the day. So you got to individualize it. And if you're on a medication, it's really important. If I'm having people that are on meds like SSRI medications, amino acids will help the drugs work better because these drugs work by blocking reuptake ports. And if you're blocking a reuptake port and you're providing more substrate, well, guess what happens? That substrate now is going to increase the symptoms or the potential effects of the drug, which can also increase the potential side effects. So I always tell patients, look at the medication that you're on, make sure you know what the side effects are. And so if we add things in, we look for those side effects to occur. If they do, we go back to the prescriber and we gently nudge down the dose of the medication under the prescriber's control. So we got to look at what those side effects are. That way, if it happens, great, we adjust, or we just go slower too. So my goal is, if we're going to adjust medication, we're always doing it from a point of stability, not instability. And we're always utilizing the prescriber that prescribed it. And if you're on some of these meds long-term, whether it's an SSRI or maybe even benzos are the worst, we may need a very, very long-term taper. It just really depends. Could be 6 months up to a year, depending on what the medication. Benzos tend to be worse. SSRIs tend to be less. And it depends on how long you've been on them for. Okay. So, but either way, we don't touch medication dosages unless we have everything in order, we're stable, and then we have a prescriber that's involved in the prescription of the medication, monitoring and tapering the dose.
Well said. And there's a link between antidepressants and gut bacteria too. If you just look up antidepressants, microbiome, you can find some studies on this. But we now know that these antidepressants are negatively affecting the gut, and we're seeing
Yep.
changes with bacteria. And in particular, we're seeing Clostridia and other pathogenic organisms that we test for via stool and urine. We're seeing these pathogenic bacteria overgrow. So there is a link now between antidepressants and bacterial overgrowth in the gut. So just keep that in mind. If you're somebody who's been on these prescriptions for a period of time, you're having gut issues, maybe you've worked through some protocols, whether it's with us or other practitioners, maybe you're not to the finish line yet, consider the drug could be a contributing factor. I'm not telling you stop the drug. I'm telling you that it needs to be factored in, and we got to try to counteract what that drug is doing. And we've seen cases like that where Clostridia just keeps coming back, and the drug, if the doctor was able to remove it from the protocol, then boom, they were able to get well and stay well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my personal opinion on medications like SSRIs or drugs like that, The only, real good application, in my opinion, is some kind of a short term where someone may commit suicide or harm themselves. That's the only, I think, valid reason to be on it at all, is for just pure stabilization, and then working with someone with various therapies, whether it's talk therapy, and then I think combining EFT or EMDR with that to kind of calm everything down, and then utilize the diet and nutrients, and then get off the medication. The problem with most medications is once you're on it, you kind of get stuck, and the prescriber doesn't want to take you off, and they're also not fixing the underlying root issues. So, my general application is if something's incredibly acute, that may make sense. But outside of that, you want to always try to work on coming off that responsibly with all the foundational support underneath and with the prescriber involved. So if anyone's listening and they're on a medication like that and they just want to come off, don't do that. Work with the functional medicine doc, and then we'll also work with your prescriber to get you off, because there's always can be some kind of a relapse that happens, and we don't want anyone to be in a position where their neurotransmitters just really go wonky, where they may do something they regret.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think that's all I have to say on it. So if you have any more, then let me know. Otherwise, we'll give people some info here where they could reach out if they need help. I know you've got some products to mention. I've got some too as well. So in your show link, in your show notes on the podcast app, you should be able to click there and then boom, check out some of these products. If you're on drugs, consult with us or consult with your practitioner how you may work some of these in.
Yeah, the big ones that I use in my line, of course, a good my multi support pack, excellent. Brain Replete's going to have that 10-to-1 ratio of tyrosine to serotonin with some of the cofactors there. I'll also use serotonin with B6. So in my line, serotonin replete or dopa replete are going to be the big ones. And then dopa replete plus is my bigger L-dopa, which is it's, let's say, a little bit more down the line in regards to dopamine synthesis, so it can have a better effect on improving dopamine levels. So those are my big ones. We'll put the links down below. Evan, what are some of the ones that you have in your store that you use with patients?
Well, a lot of them I'm ordering through third parties, so I don't have any on my store right now, and we're moving warehouse, so I don't have any right this second. But if you're working clinically with me, I will definitely educate you on those. And then some of the Zimbrin and some of those, there's different professional manufacturers that we use, so there's a couple different brands. But either way, you could reach out and we'll let you know what we're going to use.
Yeah, it may be a good idea. You have a category on your website, like maybe neurotransmitters. So people are listening to this down the road, maybe look for a category on brain nutrients or neurotransmitters, and some of those will be there too. I have a category on brain nutrients too. So we'll try to make it easy for y'all to navigate. If you need support, we'll put links down below.
Awesome. If you need help clinically, you can reach out. Dr. J works with people worldwide via phone, FaceTime, Skype, however you need to chat. So please reach out to him at justinhealth.com. And if you need me, Evan Brand, evanbrand.com is the website. And we love working with this stuff. I mean, we've been able to transform our own lives with these products. We've been able to transform thousands of other lives. And so this is really just a sigh of relief when you can fix these issues and you can help people take back not only their mood, but take back their life. I mean, when you optimize these things with brain chemistry, you can allow people to become more focused. You can allow them to become more calm. They can sleep better. They become better parents. They become better husband, better wife, better workers, better CEOs, better entrepreneurs. So it's just incredible what you can do when you optimize this stuff. And so we want to test, not guess, figure out what's going on, look under the hood, and you can help modulate these things. So please reach out if you need help.
Yeah, and if someone's coming into this, they're not quite sure where to start. Keep it really simple. Start with the food. Start with a good, healthy paleo template out of the gates. Maximize your ability to break down protein with HCl, good digestive acid and enzymes. Just start there out of the gates, because that's the building block for everything. And then from there, definitely get a practitioner in your corner to really work on all the building blocks, all the supplement support, all the other precursor support, so you have that good foundation. And then maybe also dive deeper into a lot of the gut, which could be a lot of bottlenecks. So if you have chronic digestive issues, that's going to be an important part of the equation as well.
Totally. Well said. Well, always
Excellent.
fun. I love these brain neurotransmitter episodes. They're always a blast. I think they're very helpful, very empowering for people. So please give us a review. We would love it if you can review Justin's show on iTunes or my show on iTunes. We really appreciate it. Give us some stars. Let us know what you think. Share it with your friends and family, people who are dealing with issues. We know that depression, anxiety issues are massively increased over the last year. So the thing that we can hope here is that this is a beacon of light to help people know that there is solution to this problem.
100%. We'll put some review links below so you guys don't have to hunt it down too far to do that. We really appreciate it. You guys have a phenomenal day. Take care, y'all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.